weekend we're celebrating the ministry of our preschool. It is, if you've ever come through here on a weekday, it is a complete joy to come through here and have all these little busy bodies running around this place. It's pretty darn fun. It's pretty fun. But this weekend we're going to celebrate. Tomorrow morning we have this pancake breakfast to raise funds for the preschool. And the preschool kids are going to be up front singing tomorrow morning. And so it's going to be a great day. We're going to celebrate these little busybodies. These ones who are squirrely and goofy. These ones who around my house always seem to have sticky fingers. And they're the mess makers. They're sort of little monsters. But they're also cuddly. They're beautiful. They're wonderful. They're adorable. And most importantly, they're children. Some of you may know that I have two children around my house. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. My 5-year-old's name is Lars, and I can't help but think about them on this weekend when we celebrate children. We celebrate the ministries of our church. And I think my children are the epitome of both monsters and just adorable angels. A story about my son Lars. When he was about 18 months old, he had already visited the ER for stitches. In our basement, he'd run around and hit his head on a corner, and of course, I was home alone and picked up the cell phone and said, "Baby, get home now!" Ran to the ER and they fixed him up. Now, the worst part of the story is not 2 months later, we were up on the Gunflint Trail. We were down at the end of the Gunflint Trail at this place called Wilderness Canoe Base, in which, we had our son with us, and he tripped down 2 stairs and cut his lip open. Now, if you know anything about the Gunflint Trail, the closest hospital is 50 miles away in Grand Marais. And of course, we make the trip 50 miles to Grand Marais, and for the second time in 2 months, Lars had stitches. He's a monster. He is. He's a monster. But he can also be this just adorably studious, incredible kid. And then there's our 2-year-old, Joran. And Joran, what I found out about him since moving here is he's the one who will entertain all of you during worship. Yeah, he's the one whose legs are usually in the air in the pew, or he's up front, the one dancing around the chancel up there during the children's message. These kids are adorable, but they can also be a challenge. They can be monsters. And so we give thanks for them. We give thanks for the gift of children this weekend. Our story today is, our lesson for today is a response by a woman named Hannah. It's a song Hannah actually sings. Hannah is this woman. In the verses preceding our reading for today, we hear the story of Hannah. Hannah is one of 2 wives to this man by the name of Elkanah. She's one of 2 wives. And the story of Hannah is that Hannah is unable to bear children, while the other wife bears all the children in the family. And so you can imagine in that day and age when the birth of a child means so much to a woman. It means your future. It means your legacy, especially if you were to have a boy in that day and age. The story is of Hannah, who struggles. She lives a life of sort of suffering. Hannah is not unlike the stories of Sarah and Rebecca and Rachel, other characters in the story who weren't able to have children. And so the story is of this one who's bitter, this one who suffers. Even this other wife will make fun of her, will antagonize her because she's unable to have these children. And so Hannah reaches her breaking point after many years. She reaches her breaking point with herself and with God. And the story goes on that she went to the synagogue. She went to the synagogue because she was mad at God and wanted to make a deal with God. And so when she arrives at the synagogue, she's sobbing, the story tells us. She's crying. And there at the synagogue, even the priest antagonizes her. Why do you sob so much? You must be a drunk. And so the story goes that there in that place of worship, she prays to God. She offers sacrifice. And God, as we know the story goes, God offers her this child. She gives birth to a child. And so our reading today is her response. It's her response of joy and thanksgiving. But I think it's more than that. I think it's more than that. I invite you to pull out this sheet again. I want to walk through this reading real quickly. The reading from 1 Samuel, if you'll follow along. This is Hannah's song. My heart exalts in the Lord. My strength is exalted in my God. My mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in my victory. There is one Holy One like the Lord, no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly. Let not arrogance come from your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by the Lord actions are weighed. And then the tone of the reading changes. And listen carefully to these words. It says, the bows of the mighty are broken, but the feeble gird on strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, but those who were hungry are fat with spoil. The barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. The Lord kills and brings to life. The Lord brings down to Sheol and raises up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich, brings low and also exalts. The Lord raises up the poor from the dust, lifting the needy from the ash heap, to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. Hannah's song isn't just a song of thanksgiving. It's not just a song of thanksgiving. It's a song that talks about the image God sees of this world. And it's an image of 100% total reversal. It's a song of revolution. She talks about the bows of the mighty, they're broken. Talks about the poor being raised from the dust, the full or the hungry are made full, the barren are given kids, the poor and the sad places of honor. This song of Hannah paints a picture of how God sees the least, how God sees the poor, the outcast, the vulnerable. If we might, on this weekend when we talk about children, the little ones. Now, Hannah's song, her story, on the one hand, it's a little too simplistic for today. And yet, it's a story, I think, that reminds us of where we find God in the midst of suffering. God's this faithful one. God's this just one. God's even this sort of revolutionary of sort. The least, it says, those who suffer, those who have no voice have places of honor with God. You see, this weekend we celebrate the preschool ministry of our church, and more formally tomorrow we're going to give thanks for people like Jana Rebrovich, who oversees our preschool. We're going to thank all those teachers, Nicole, Amy, Julie, Alice, Vicki. And some people might ask, well, why are we taking the time to do that during church? And I think this story reminds us that to God, it's the most vulnerable. It's the little ones, the least of these. They're the ones that are of greatest importance to God. Of greatest importance. When Lars was a little guy, about 2 years old, I remember taking him to Macy's. It must have been a Father-Son Day, which is always a little scary. I think we went to the mall so I could get a Cinnabon. Do you know what a Cinnabon is? Yeah. They're my favorite. But we ended up going into Macy's, and of course, Lars would crawl under all these little, the coat where all the coats are hung, and I'd have to find him out from under there. But I remember, how in department stores they have those mirrors that kind of go from floor to ceiling? And I remember distinctly walking by those mirrors, and he would stop and kind of go, look. He'd look at his reflection. And he did this 2 or 3 times. And the 4th time, I remember Well, I'd say this. I think if each one of us could see our reflection in the mirror, the reflection that God sees of us in the mirror, we might be sort of like Mars. Who's that? I think today we remember that God sees in the little ones. In those who are lost, those who suffer, God sees something wonderful and amazing. And maybe even in some of us, God sees the same thing. When we look into that mirror, we might see one thing, but God sees something totally different. You see, as we celebrate and we raise funds for our preschool this weekend, our hope is that these kids, these little youngsters, will grow up knowing the story of this sort of a God. This God who looks at each one of us and sees something absolutely amazing. This sort of revolutionary God, a God who takes the Hannahs of this world, who takes the children of this world, who takes the lost, the suffering of this world, takes them all into his arms. He says, you are mine. Thanks be to God. Amen.